Okay, so this is our second pearl in the D&K2 study in 1957 on the purpose of sleep and when we dream rapid eye movement or non-rapid eye movement using objective measures. Now, it's a laboratory experiment with manipulation false environment. And for hypothesis 1, the purpose was to compare dream recall in REM and non-REM sleep. And they measured whether the subject was in REM or non-REM sleep as identified by the EEG brainwave pattern being recorded, and whether the subjects reported they'd been dreaming or not after they'd been woken up. This data was then analysed to see if there was any differences between REM and non-REM sleep as regards to dream recall. Now, they had the EEG machine, but they also had the EOG machine and the EMG machine, which was to do with muscle paralysis during REM. Now, for hypothesis 2, quantitative data was collected for a correlation analysis to establish whether there was a positive correlation between REM time and the estimated time of dreaming from the subjects. Now, hypothesis 3 was collecting the qualitative data regarding the content of the dreams, and these were compared with observations of the eye movement during REM periods to see if they matched the dream content. So the subjects, we've got a small sample of 7 adult males, 2 adult females, 5 were studied intensively, and the other 4 were used to confirm the findings of the 5 who were studied more intensely. That means they spent more nights in the sleep lab. Now, the apparatus subjects were tested in a sleep lab using the EEG machine to measure sleep objectively. Electrodes were attached to subjects' eyes to measure movement. This is the EOG. And to their scalps to measure brain activity. This is the EEG. And then they also had the EMG, which was attached down their legs to check for paralysis of the muscles during REM. So they also had other apparatus, which was a doorbell, and the doorbell was used to wake the subjects up when required, so during REM and non-REM periods. And this was to avoid experimental effects, and a tape recorder was used for the subjects to record any recollections they had from their dream woken up in REM or non-REM periods. So subjects were tested individually. They were instructed to report to the lab a little before their usual bedtime. Subjects were also told to avoid alcohol and caffeine, so this is a control, but to eat normally on the day of the experiment. And this was done as a control to prevent the effects of caffeine or alcohol from affecting the findings. The electrodes were applied to the subjects' heads and faces to avoid entanglement. It was all put sort of like a high ponytail at the back and taken out of the head of the bed. And the subjects slept on their own in a quiet, dark lab, and their brainwave patterns were recorded constantly throughout their period of sleep. During the testing of hypothesis 1, at various times during the night, some of which were during REM and some during non-REM periods, the participants were woken by the doorbell. They had been instructed to record immediately into the tape recorder whether or not they'd been dreaming, and then they were asked to return to sleep, and this usually occurred within less than 5 minutes. To further control extraneous variables, there was no contact with the experiment before dream reports, and this was to avoid experimental bias and to reduce demand characteristics. Participants were not told whether they had been in REM or non-REM periods when they were woken up by the doorbell, and this was again to avoid bias. 2 subjects, which initials will mean more to you when we get to the results, PM and KC, were woken according to a random numbers table to remove any likely pattern. 1 subject, IR, was woken at whim of the experimenter, and 1 subject, DN, was woken during 3 REM periods and 3 non-REM periods. 1 subject, whose initials are WD, was told he would only be woken in REM sleep, but was actually woken in non-REM sleep periods as well. Now, the testing of hypothesis 2, subjects were woken either 5 or 15 minutes after REM sleep began and were asked to estimate the length of their dream by choosing either 5 or 15 minutes. These findings were then correlated with the length of time in REM sleep according to the objective machine. The participants were also asked to relate the content of their dream, and the length of the narrative was correlated with the duration of REM sleep before they were woken. So hypothesis 3, subjects were woken 1 minute after one of 4 patterns of eye movement had occurred. So for example, mainly vertical, eyes moving up and down, mainly horizontal, eyes moving from side to side, both vertical and horizontal, and when there was little or no eye movement. And they were asked what they'd been dreaming about, and the data was analysed to see if the pattern related to the content of the dream. The total number of awakenings for all 9 subjects was 351 times over 61 nights, which averaged 5.7 awakenings per subject per night, and the awakenings were spread over the nights as follows. So 21% in the first 2 hours, 29% hours 3 and 4, 28% in hours 5 and 6, and 22% in hours 7 and 8. So it wasn't a very good night's sleep for the participants. So that is the procedure, the apparatus, the method, design, your participants, self-selected students to take part in the sleep study.